This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 154.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
Benny the Beard, what's up, my friend?
I'm doing well, my friend. I am, warm. As the weather's getting warmer, the chin is getting even warmer. So I can't complain. Love being warm. How about you?
I'm good. By the way, I'm your host, Ramsey Majaba. We're supposed to say that, I guess, for people who are new to listening to the show. So I'm your host, Benny Marjaba, and this is your co-host, Kanungo the Beard, Benny Ramsey. I am your host, Ramsey Marjaba. He's your co-host, Binayak Kanungo, otherwise known as Benny the Beard. And we already asked you how you're doing. Let's just not make this any worse. We talked to Jose today, Espinoza. So Jose Espinoza today, and I just enjoy talking to Jose. Like we've known each other for a while. I've been trying to get him on the show because he's had a bunch of different experiences that he talks about on the show. But I'm very interested in the way he learns. So,
also, fun fact. I mean, more so for me personally, it's actually kind of cool. Jose worked with a ex-colleague of mine, or somebody I worked with at my old job here in Ottawa. He worked with her down, I think, in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. So it's kind of cool that the world is so small, and that Jose had a mutual contact with somebody that I worked very closely with.
like, did they work from the same office, or they just worked from the same company?
I'm not sure, actually. That's a good question. I know that she, like my old colleague, she used to live down in Florida, so it's possible that they were maybe down in the same
Okay.
office. I don't think Jose's from Florida, is he?
He's currently in California. I don't know if he's ever moved to Florida. Anyways, yeah, it is a very small world, and from what I've seen, if you're making connections anywhere in the world, can help in one way, form, or another. Yeah, that's the saying.
6 degrees to Kevin Bacon, was it? Or something like that?
Yeah, there's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I have no idea what that has anything to do with the show, so let's just jump in.
All right.
Mr. Jose Espinoza, welcome back to EDSCs. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's as we were just saying a little bit ago, it's been interesting over the last year with all the changes in the world, industry, new positions, new roles, right?
Yeah.
But I think, as I was mentioning, to just kind of finding that what's that word here? Kind of finding that stability, right, and that calm and peace in the midst of all the change. And it's weird for me now because when things aren't happening, it's like, all right, I feel I'm almost like used to it now, right?
Yeah.
We in my company, we had our SKO in, I think it was in January, and then we didn't really have that new fiscal kind of lull that happened. Once that end of quarter or Q4 push, everyone's just trying to go all out, and then then you finalize the fiscal year, and we didn't really have that time to just kind of, with the holidays and whatnot, just kind of settle down. It just continued, and it was getting to the point where some people were getting a little agitated just because of just so many things happening. But then it comes in waves, right? So now it's like, if the market's not demanding, so many amount or so much of like customer facing sessions or discovery sessions or deep dive or scoping sessions or demos or whatnot, then you're kind of, well, in the meantime, let me just kind of stay busy with it and just kind of grow. So that's what I've been focusing on. I joined the company probably that I'm with right now. It was in August of last year, and we're in March now, 2021. So it's been a lot of wrap up for me, just kind of getting used to this new industry, the stuff we're doing, the companies we're working with. It's been very fascinating and very interesting. So never a dull moment for me. But yeah, it's been good.
All right. Now, since
Uh-oh.
we went through all that, do you mind just letting people know who you are? I mean, last time you were on the show, you weren't on the podcast. You were on the No SE Left Behind. You had your job was affected from Corona, but you found a new job since, thankfully. Where are you? Which industry you're in? And where were you before? And just let us know about your transition into the new industry.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, the role that I was at before was also a new industry for me, but and very different. So the company that I'm with now is called Loftware. It's a company out of New Hampshire, and it's interesting because their their value prop in the market is really in the area what they call like e-labeling and product labeling. And it's funny for me because when I hear the word label, I think of label, right, like an Avery label or something like that. But think of like product packaging. Think of any kind of, whether it's labels themselves, like shipping labels, all the Amazon stuff we're doing nowadays, or even like product labeling and what goes on in the supply chain world, right? Um, so our software basically does a couple of things. It connects backend systems that are used by these enterprise companies, ERP such as SAP, for example, Oracle, and for multiple backends, and being able to not just pull the data, but dynamically through different types of criteria, variability, update that when it comes to the packaging side. So if you think of like I don't know, a product that you might like, Bose headphones, Estee Lauder makeup, anything like that. And you think of like where their marketing organizations are producing these packages to kind of ship all over the world, right? Um, the artwork itself, the images, the product data itself um, might change if you're going to APAC versus Western Europe, right? And in each industry and each type of product segment and market has their own level of requirements when it comes to um, that whole supply chain transaction. Take for example some of the companies that are current customers I won't mention, but three of them produce vaccines for COVID, but I won't mention their names, right? Well, there's a whole slew of regulatory issues that they're going to run into when they're shipping and managing the supply chain delivery process to get these to how they're going to get distributed and then administered, right? So the contents inside the medicine or vaccine and biotech, what's required in compliance and data. So we're basically connecting data and we're actually fulfilling and delivering that to the end product itself. Um, and it's interesting for me because I come from a graphics background way before I was even in IT or in sales engineering. So typically the way that companies would produce these after the product itself is launched and whatnot, the marketing department will take care of actually getting these fulfilled, right? And a lot of this material will be produced in different software applications, graphics programs. You would have a team that would be in charge of the copywriting itself and other information that goes on in some of these packages. And then it would get fulfilled through whatever contract and vendors they have for the packaging itself. Think of a Coke can or Pepsi can, the information, the data that's on the can itself. Or if it's some kind of medicine or vaccine, the information that goes on the packaging and on the actual, like the product, the cartridge, right? So all that is very interesting for me because you're dealing with what happens if you have $1 million worth of product that can't enter a country because the correct information is not on there for display. So it goes through customs and it's unacceptable, right? And when you think of how that's going to work, and every hour that product sits there on a container ship, for example, if we're looking at that level, before it enters a country, it can get distributed. Every hour that passes, companies potentially losing tens of thousands, if not more. So the value play there is really huge in terms of how we can prevent that and how we can help those kind of issues and bottlenecks. So there's a lot of things happening with that, and for me, it's a challenge because it pulls on the graphic side a little bit because I'm very familiar with the way companies do that from the marketing standpoint. From an IT standpoint, we're also dealing with a SaaS offering we offer, and then also a cloud, more of an infrastructure kind of an offering that we have. So the conversations can become pretty complex, and kind of finding that balance, right? That's kind of the SC's MO, right? Finding the balance between having those business value discussions with business people and stakeholders versus IT. So on the one hand, I could be dealing with a marketing individual, maybe a C-level contact that's looking for, how are we going to save them, X amount of dollars, all the way down to how do we integrate with their ERP and what's a JVM and how are we going to deal with a distributed, architecture environment for them. So I love that. It's just the conversations are different.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You started off in graphics at some point in your career. Maybe you didn't start off, but you did graphics at some point in your career, and then you moved into IT.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So I started off actually in the graphics side of graphic design. And what I mean by that is, if you think of like, especially now, everyone is really talking about like UX design or maybe even full stack development. That's kind of what it's known today. But before we had all that, if you think about like identity and corporate logos and identity design, even typography, font design, branding, right? That term's used more today. But back then, like the logo of Nike, for example, or the CBS logo. These are corporate identities that they had to be designed, back in the day, and these weren't just put together as some sort of an artwork piece. They were a corporate statement that they were making. So I started off on the graphic side of the coin, which was actually producing these. So the designers would come up with these concepts, and now we have to have these reproduced, whether they're going to go on TV, if it's broadcasting, or in packaging, or if it's going to be on a brochure, for example, when that stuff was big back then. That kind of got me into like just the design and creative side. It's like, okay, well, that's cool, but I want to do my own work. So that kind of fueled my desire to going into the graphic design, which is the conceptual piece. So think of it this way: think of an interior designer, right? And they might go to your home, and they might kind of, based on that discovery they do with you, based on the information they gather, they're gonna have a pretty good idea, narrowing down to the color scheme and and even the kind of furniture you're gonna have. They might not necessarily be the ones painting your walls, right?
No.
Or putting the furniture together, but they're going to be more of a quarterback and bringing in the painters, the procuring the furniture, if you're going to build out an extra office, all that kind of thing. So the graphic designer kind of is the quarterback. Um, so for example, in my design roles, I would pull in illustrators, photographers, and other types of folks to make that concept into reality. But the biggest difference is the graphic side produces this, where the designer conceptualizes. And that got me into the IT, in the IT world. And the reason was because I was contracted by Xerox for about a year and a half. We were doing a special project back then with LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District, and it was a textbook replacement program that was being created, talked about. It was a partnership between Xerox and LAUSD, and this was in the days. This is a long time ago, where the world of enterprise content management was just really getting its footing back then. ECM, the likes of like Interwoven, FileNet, OpenText, now really Documentum, and DocuShare were the big ones for Xerox. And we were creating this kind of customized ECM platform for LAUSD, where we can check in curriculum based on the district standards for different grade levels. It would have media, it would have curriculum, hard copy, digital assets. So that's the role I was brought into. And then what ended up happening is, because of that, that kind of brought me into the other side of Xerox, which is, hey, they're trying to sell this office equipment, and some of these were like big, $100,000 um, machines, and that can produce these incredible masterpieces in terms of color and artwork and art. For example, like Amazon printing out books, for example, right? If you go to Amazon, they're not necessarily buying these books and reselling to you, although they do now, but they can actually print these things in house.
Yep.
So I was dealing with marketing agencies and different entities that were producing these, and that got me more into IT, because now you're getting into, how do I reproduce this concept in these files on a Xerox equipment, and how do I make sure that the colors are accurate? Where we're dealing with RGB color space, and when it comes to web design, it's CMYK. It's the complete opposite when it comes to laying down on media like substrates like paper or clothing. And then if you want to be really accurate, you use a Pantone library, for example, one of many different color libraries. So that blue or that T-Mobile purple pink is going to be accurate and consistent throughout different media. That's how I got into IT. And that's how I got into being in the sales engineer world, because they got to the point where we have sales teams who are speaking to these customers, and they want to sell them this technology. So this was a combination of hardware and software. So they had to have someone like me that can actually translate that to their customers. Like, well, how's that going to work with my files in Photoshop or Illustrator, that kind of thing. And that's kind of like fell into this role, and it's been crazy. I've loved the ride, but now, like in the last 2 years, especially, this whole world's been exploding, in the SE world rather, in terms of what it's all about. It's been awesome.
Wow.
There's so much we could take out of that. I guess just one little point, I suppose. Again, there's a lot that we'll probably get into, but it's kind of cool how you've always seemed to have, just from the roles that you described, you always seem to fit that space of almost being that. I guess you could almost describe it as a quarterback to a degree, where you're getting all these requests from a client, let's say, or a prospect, or whatever it is, and then just to be able to interpret what they're looking for within the context of what your organization is able to provide, whether it be through the resources they have available or the skills or whatever, and then eventually making it so for the client and eventually delivering that product seems very similar to what SEs do in many respects, in that they're getting all these requirements and whatnot from a prospect. And then you're the one that's kind of, well, you're architecting a solution to a degree and then eventually presenting something back to that prospect. And ideally they like it and end up coming on board. But it's kind of cool that despite being in the design world, you kind of still had that SC-esque type of role or set of responsibilities even there. And obviously that's translated very well to everything that you've done since and continue to do. So I thought that was kind of neat, without a doubt. But there were a couple other things as well. So I mean, you just started in this, or your new job about 8 months ago, you mentioned, but you sound so knowledgeable in it, and you obviously have a lot of passion behind the space itself and all the different intricacies of everything that goes into labeling even. What did you do to get that comfortable? Like, what did you do to get yourself comfortable over the first 8 months when you had to kind of level yourself up and when there weren't as many resources around? What did you do to get comfortable and to get to the point where you are right now?
That's a great question. I knew this was going to happen. No, it was, at first it was challenging because it was so new to me, right? And I was like, okay, I need to kind of wrap my mind around this whole thing. And the way I learn is very circular. Give you an example, even just backing up a little bit to the whole SE journey. A few years after I got into this SE world, again, not being traditional IT, I was dealing with a lot of customers on the IT side, right? And these were like your traditional system admins. And back then, I mean, gosh, we're thinking, and you still had NT4, Windows 2000. I think Data Center Server was barely coming out. I was still working on non-Windows because little confession, I used to just really despise Windows. Like you had no idea coming from the Macintosh side, I just loathed Windows. Plus being a graphics person, we had this kind of like elitist attitude that Microsoft, oh no, it has to be Apple, and I was a diehard Mac guy. But my wife's aunt was a 3D computer animator who was very much of an Apple person, but she noticed that I kind of had this natural talent for just technical stuff. And I found myself even even before I got into IT, just in the world of graphics, getting into like font conversions between Apple and Windows back then, True Type fonts, Open Type fonts, and it just was really natural to me. So when I started, fast forwarding, dealing with customers that were more traditional IT guys, I realized I was lacking that foundation, right? And I was struggling with a little bit, what should I do? Should I go and get my certs in this area, that area? And it was like in like I think 2000, maybe 5 or 6. I'm trying to think now. When I said, you know what, I'm gonna go for my Cisco and at least go for my CCNA, just because I really didn't like Microsoft. I didn't want an MCSD. And then I started down that journey and learning a little bit about BGP and different things. But I'm like, I don't want to be, stuck on Cisco equipment. It's like I don't just want to wear this badge, right? I want to learn more about technology, not just about the way they do, and even though Cisco's been the market leader for the longest time, it's just I don't want to be pigeonholed into just one thing. So, and I really struggled actually with like trying to find that hotspot. And I don't even know what happened after a few weeks of just kind of like, I mean, my wife and I were talking about this. I was talking to a bunch of different friends of mine. There's some guys who were like diehard Unix and guys, and I really liked BSD too back then. And it just somehow hit me like, I guess because I've always been entrepreneurial, part of me is like, I just like when business and technology just kind of intersect. I mean, I can be, and I've been in those like pulling an all-nighter on a company's, company building, doing a migration, cutting over their servers and all that. I've done that. I've been in those bad cases where you can have, pizza, Red Bull, and pull an all-nighter doing migrations, which is cool. But it's like there's got to be more to that, right? And I realized maybe this is where I'm like the best. I just love having these things come together, and it what it did is once I started having that kind of awareness of where my real hotspot was, it was a game changer for me. Like to your question and comment about that whole quarterback and kind of thing, I realized when like in the last few weeks and months, one of your other guests, Chris White, I've been listening to some of the issues he's been tackling on like what's wrong today with like training when it comes to salespeople versus SEs, right? And I realized, it's funny for me, just looking back, I enjoyed sales training. And I think it's like, it was funny because I would talk to some of my colleagues and they're like, dude, why do you care about that? That has nothing to do with, what we do. And I'm like, yeah, I might not be a sales guy carrying a bag, but I do care about it because number one, we're getting comped on and we want to make sure that the sales guys are performing to their peak, right? So I realized I really did care about the company branding. How good is the website? Is it just a static website in HTML? Do we have a demand generation in place that can actually pull in these leads? How are we following up to these things? How are we transferring that information to the SCs? So I started being interested. It's just something that was just natural to me, really curious in terms of how does the company operate? And then that really helps when you're speaking to customers. How does their company operate? And the more you understand about how they run their business day to day and what their goals are, as an SC, and that's kind of half the battle. You understand what they're trying to do. So as opposed to doing a discovery session when you're really just hunting for pain points, if you have that context, then those pain points make a lot more sense. So to that comment about being a quarterback, yeah, definitely an SC would do that because I might not be the developer of my own product, right? I need to relay that information back to product dev or product manager team. If there's ideas on the marketing space, if the messaging's not clear when we're doing a demo, when we have that first a conversation with a customer, they're going to go to our website first and read all about us, right? We need to have that clear and concise messaging throughout the whole process. So all that kind of stuff is kind of usually outside of the realm of just your typical ST role. And some of the STs that came more from the technical side, a lot of them that I ran into, a lot of times they didn't just care. They didn't care about that, but I did. So I'm like, maybe there's something wrong with me. But I realized, just embrace it. I care about such things, so why not? And that's kind of, and in all of that, to say to the point about kind of how I use it to ramp up, it was challenging for me because it was a brand new space, and I found myself trying to just really understand the value of what we're doing, because if I can understand it, then I can help a customer understand it. That's how it is. And I think it's that old Albert Einstein quote. What is it? If you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. I think it's like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, so when I first start ramping up, the first thing I do is I go through the journey like I'm a customer. Sell me on this. Why do I care? How does it help me? Right. And then I start looking at competition and how is their messaging and what are they doing? And then once I kind of start that, and then I start getting more granular in terms of, all right, here's the verticals, and then there's specific use case challenges, and then from there going into the actual product. And my biggest thing, I got too caught up, I think, initially in just trying to understand it from a technology standpoint. But once I realized, you know what, just take the barriers off and just go through it again as a customer, the way I always did, then it all starts making sense. And then it's very crystal clear at that point. We can shorten the conversation from a 2-hour discovery session to like 15 minutes. We can shorten a demo from an hour and a half of trying to do all this huge presentation to just really simple. Here's what you need. Here's what we do. Here's how we help. Let's go. Right. We can really just kind of make it a lot more concise. So hopefully that makes a little sense. Just kind of the approach, at least that worked for me.
So just to clarify, and you may have already answered that, what do you mean when you say you're learning in a circular fashion?
So I've just having to wrap up. Some companies, they have a very good like the company that I was with before this one, a company called Eventry. I was there for a short time, and there was a massive rift not too long after I joined because we were in the event space basically. So all these huge events you hear about, like E3 and those big like Salesforce, Dreamforce events, Dell technology trade shows, they were all managed on our platform. So we had a SaaS offering, and it was a real fun space. But they were decimated and their competitors when COVID hit because all in-person events were pretty much gone. But when I was wrapping up with them, they had a very good linear certification process where, as a brand new sales guy, you're going to go through all these different steps and classes, and they weren't doing the training in person because they from the beginning until they were looking at scaling. So they did deliver this training, and there was a little bit of PowerPoint and discussion, but it was already recorded. It was on demand. So I can be doing this, these courses at 2 a.m. if I need to. I didn't have to wait to make an appointment, but it was very linear. The progression and then the courses you're taking build upon the previous one. On the technical side, same thing. But the way I learn is I might go through, okay, one, first, second, third course. After the third course, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna basically just start going wide a little bit and maybe a little more about why, right? They want to take me through a path and I'm gonna follow that path, but it's like instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or if we're talking networking, right, Ramsey, we're talking about the OSI model. I can go from the physical layer all up to the application layer or what have you, or the opposite. But with each step, I'm going to explore it, right? That's kind of how I learn. I'll go in, I'll stop, and I'll explore, and I'll kind of look at different angles, and then to the next one. So for me, it's that I do a lot of my best, I don't know, my best work when I would take time to really think and explore. For example, like if I'm learning technology, a lot of technical trainings focus on specific skills. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. A lot of the sales training might be focused on, this is what we do, this is who we are, and this is how we approach it. Or there could be a specific playbook. But I'll go through the training, then I'll pause for a moment, and then I'll just start doing a lot more digging around, and just kind of looking at it from different angles. With Lawfare, for example, one of the trainings we're going through had to do with supply chain. And we'll talk about the end-to-end kind of value propositions that we bring from product launch and ideation all the way to delivery. All right, that's cool. So, but then maybe halfway through, I'm going to look at maybe some Gartner webinars and hear from the customers themselves challenges that they're facing, and here's why a Pfizer or a Moderna really cares about this stuff. Hearing it from them directly, or maybe a Deloitte webinar. So I start looking at multiple ways because that's just going to help me. So when I'm speaking with customers, I'm not just a product guy. I'm not just a techie who's trying to speak their language, but I really care and I understand, their industry and at least how they're trying to do business. And I think that's part of that. I think that's a big one, is kind of balancing. You have to have that understanding, and I think that I heard someone use recently the term, you gotta have a tactical depth in discovery. There's table stakes you have to have on a technology piece, but if you understand how they do business and what they're doing, and you can articulate it back to them, and then they know you're listening, they know you care, right?
Right.
It's different from, selling software is different from like if we were working for like a Capgemini or Deloitte or Accenture, and we're providing consulting services. At that point, we need to dive like way deep on the process side and map everything out, right? We might not be able to do that, and we don't always have to do that when you're selling software, because we're trying to hunt for business and technology pain points and address those, articulate that, and move on. Especially the sales cycle is 30 or 45 days. I don't have the luxury, and it's just not very practical to go and do a 6 month POC. Um, which is interesting, right? Because right now I deal with enterprise AEs and I deal with mid-market folks. I love the strategy in enterprise deals, if you will, but the con with that is it could drag on, and usually time is going to kill the deal, or it's not going to be good for it because it can just go all over the map. The mid-market or commercial side is more transactional, it's faster. The reps aren't as seasoned, I find, but they're very energetic, right? And it's just a lot more fun. So it just depends. But that's been the way I've been trying to overcome my recent challenge with onboarding with them.
All right, a few comments. If I understand you correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. What you mean by learning in a circular fashion is you're basically trying to diversify the sources of your learning. You're not depending on one source. Like you have the vendor teaching you stuff, and vendors are always biased to what they want. And then you have the customer teaching you stuff. The customers are kind of in their own little world where this is my problem and this is how we solve it. You're learning from competitors as well by going on their website and digging in a little bit deeper. So you're getting kind of a holistic view, as Benny noted in the notes. You're looking at a holistic view of the solution, not just what your product managers are kind of trying to drill into your brain. Does that sound accurate?
It does. I think that's better put. I think holistic is in defining what holistic is, like you did, is really good because um, the people who are writing, right, or creating this training, they're going out there and sourcing the information, and there's that old saying, right, go straight to the source.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to someone like someone like a Deloitte or some kind of consultancy, right, their whole their whole world is providing that value and that strategic analysis. I need that if I'm going to be a the kind of like a, I'll use this term when because I've done pre and post, and I should have probably qualified it a little bit. I've also come from the post side as I got into IT, so it wasn't a straight path for me. It wasn't just graphics, pre-sales, or cell engineering. It was I kind of went throughout different parts, but for us that were in the field implementing, when a guy was just kicking butt, taking A's, we would say, that guy's a monster in the field. And that guy's just bomb, right? That's how we would say. And if I want to be that, or people use the term rock star, if you want to be a rock star SE, I think the more you know, and the more you can show that depth and that understanding, the better off you're going to be. Because then I feel sometimes that because if we're working for organizations selling software, SaaS, whatever it is, that's your first priority, right? That's your organization. You have company goals and things you have to attain, right? That's your first and foremost. But as a technology person, I don't consider myself a product person. I consider myself more of a technology consultant. And it doesn't matter what kind of technology. It doesn't matter even what kind of industry. The bottom line is there's issues that need to be resolved. Customers need your help. They're going to pay good money for you to give it to them. And what I try to do is kind of mix that consultant approach with the software. So if it doesn't really matter what technology it is, although I think that having the industry depth is going to be a big advantage. If we're talking about, I'll use for example, Salesforce. We use Salesforce as a CRM. If I was selling Salesforce, I would want to know what all my competition's doing. I want to know how we stack up against Microsoft Dynamics, and maybe some of the other players out there. There's startups that are kind of chomping at the feet a little bit, and there's other established players. The more you have that understanding, the better you're going to be. You can look at market trends and shifts in the industry and how that's going to impact you. And yeah, so I think saying that a holistic approach or holistic view, that's a lot. That's very well said, I think.
Well, thanks, Benny, for noting it so I can use it and take credit.
No, it's a team effort, but yeah, no, it makes sense though, and it also aligns well with I think everything that you mentioned earlier about that whole quarterbacking role that SEs play, and that you almost have to have that holistic view of things in order to be the best SE you can to anybody that or I guess to any of your stakeholders. I feel like SEs, and I think we probably talked about this on the show as well in the past, but I feel like SEs probably among the highest number of stakeholders that rely on the actions that an SE is involved with compared to maybe most other positions at an organization. I only say that because while SE is very heavily related on the technical side, speaking with product management about issues they're seeing in the field, or supporting issues, or working with support rather to help troubleshoot issues that they're coming across, speaking with dev for custom development or about issues as well. So the whole technical piece you have to get very well ingrained into. But obviously the whole piece about being a sales engineer, the whole sales side requires you to be very on top of all the business stuff as well, and understanding what customer experiences are like, so you can then translate that in the sales cycle, and being able to just understand customers, customers like their own industries, I suppose, and not so much your own customers, but rather your prospects and their customers and the things that they care about, just so that, again, you could better deliver your solution to be able to help solve their problems and help reach their goals. So yeah, that whole holistic understanding of things, without a doubt, I think is so critical for being an SE. And it's really cool that those things all just come so naturally to you, because yeah, as you were saying everything, it's just in my head checking off all the boxes about like, yep, that's a great quality to have. That's something that like every top SE probably should be doing. Check, 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 check. So yeah, really cool to hear all of that coming from you. That's great.
I gotta say though, you got to be careful sometimes with that, because one thing that was a source of frustration for me in the past. And I had to learn to really temper it over the years. That same mindset is gonna spill over into your own company, right? Um, many times I've worked in organizations where I'm seeing inefficiencies in our own in the way we do. It could be something like, we need to update our website, and because I came from that design role, and you're dealing with blowing something up 1500% in Photoshop to make sure it's exact. I'll notice every typo, every mispunctuation, everything you can. I mean, and it's a running joke right now. Um, and professionally for me with family, if there's a bug, I'm gonna find it, and I promise you, I'm not trying to find bugs. It's just the way it is. And maybe because I did some of that in the past, we're more like UX QA kind of thing. But if I click on something and it's not responding, okay, that could be me. That could be my internet. We'll try this again. Oh, it's a bug. All right, there it is. Like for example, we're March. What did it say? March 11th, right? Um, a few days ago, Paramount Plus they came out with a new app, and I use the NVIDIA Shield, so it's based on Android TV, and I think it's like a rebranding of CBS All Access. So Paramount Plus came out, and there's a free trial, so I downloaded it. We're watching some movies on it and stuff, and I'm like, all right. First thing I notice is I don't have a watch list like on Netflix. Okay, why not? When they probably didn't think about it. Okay, can I even mark it as a favorite? No, so I have to do a search for the show every time we want to see it. Eventually, I guess the AI built into it. Now it serves up what that show is if we do a search, but I didn't want to have to search all the time, right? Something as simple as that. It's like the first thing I notice. It's where's my favorites, right? And there's just little things like that. That's just going to come out. But when it comes to what I was saying earlier with your organization, there's a lot of times where whether it be something like our company website, whether it be the product itself, um, the way we're marketing this, or like even sales playbooks, there's a lot of room for improvement. And generally, I want to go ahead and bring it to someone's attention. There's a couple of times where, depending on the culture and the company I'm working with, they're not very receptive to that. Um, and I've used this example a couple of times where one company I work with, their product it just left a lot to be desired from a UI standpoint. Especially like we're in 2021. This is a few years ago, and the GUI looked like NT. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. So I would have like in back then, especially if I was like in partner sales or like partner channel sales, and then the SEs I'm overlaying. They're telling me during lunch or something like that. Hey, dude, I love you guys, love you, but your product, man. When are you guys gonna update this, that, or the other? And I'll go ahead and I'll bring that feedback, to my product folks. And I would get responses like, well, that's just the way we do it. Okay. Uh, any chance that's going to be in the product roadmap? What about this one XYZ? No. Yeah, don't even worry about that. That's just the way it is. And that's just, I'm like, all right, well, yeah, that kind of attitude is not going to keep you in business long, because these are kind of your customers, right? And their feedback should matter. So the fact that they weren't as receptive, that's when, like, if you're not aware of what's happening in the organization, you don't want to bring that up too often, because it's gonna be bad, right? In one way or another. But you want to bring it up. So now tempering that with running things through official channels. If you're creating some kind of a ticket like an Atlas Jira, or some other kind of platform, you're submitting that. Maybe you're bringing that up to your management. Here's how it could affect the deal. And then to the next level, do we have insights on this? Are we tracking these features? Can we tie this into revenue we lost? Um, so yeah, I've stumbled and I've tripped a couple of times because of that same. I don't know if it's a blessing or curse, but now I think it's more tempered, so it could be good.
It's funny, like we've all been through that. The way I've been dealing with it recently, when there's something like, let's say the playbook isn't good enough. We have a team of SEs here in Canada. We just work together on creating a playbook. The training isn't good enough, and this is like our director, our sales director. He kind of pushes us to, this is not good enough for you. Make your own, make it better, right? And then share it with marketing, right? Don't just tell them, hey, your stuff sucks. Fix it, make it better, send it to them. They don't like it, that's fine, but you did all the work, and now you can use it going forward. And we've had in my previous company, we've had products that the GUI was just horrendous, and we would just spin it as, well, it's a powerful GUI. That's why you have a lot of options. And sometimes product just don't want to put in the investment and change because they don't see that they're going to make their money back, because a lot of SEs don't open tickets, don't tell them they've lost deals because of the GUI. We don't know all that information either, but it's hard to track. Yeah, I get that. I do want, go ahead, Benny.
Oh, sorry, it's a quick question, maybe clarification for people who maybe aren't so technical. GUI being like global unique identifier, or sorry, what is GUI standing for here?
Graphical user interface.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you.
But yeah, I want to push back on one thing. I don't think SEs are the quarterbacks. I think SEs are kind of like either the running back or the, maybe the running back, where the salesperson hopefully is the quarterback. They give us the ball and we carry it for a big portion, a big chunk of the field. That's how I see it. At least that's how I hope sales teams work. What do you guys think about that?
I have my thoughts. Jose first, though, unless you'd like me to go first, either.
I think I would agree. It just really depends, right? I had a situation with one company I recently joined. Well, not recently, but shortly after I joined. The director asked me. He said, "Jose, were you the position you had before? It was a management position, but I was basically the SC over SCs for multiple channels." And I had like bat phone first line contact with developers in the company, with anyone I needed for anything, any product. And when I joined this organization, starting as an SC with them, very, very conservative, because the previous role I was with a parent organization, and in this new role I was with their direct sales channel, and I didn't have all that access. I didn't have all that that freedom, if you will. He asked me. He said, in this role, it's the sales rep or the AE that controls the sale, and you're more of a support role. How are you going to be able to adjust to that? I said, there's no problem there, because I know where my role is and I know what the expectations are. So that's what's going to be. I have no problem being that, that kind of like the kind of like Batman in the cave. I have no problem like being that guy in a technical layer, right, supporting the rep. And I think Ramsey's thing is right on. In a deal scenario, the rep should be the one that is driving and really kind of pulling everything together. And you really find that with experienced tenured AEs, especially in the enterprise space, those that have been around, those who know how to do that. What I found though sometimes is if they're new to the organization, even at the enterprise level, even if they're seasoned, and more so in the mid-market space, they don't have that experience and they don't have that tenure, they don't have that comfort level. And it's funny because there's a kind of a debate where kind of like, where does the line for the SC stop? And I think that's maybe more of a personal thing with me of being entrepreneurial. Like, I'll give you an example. I went through not too long ago, I went through some training, and there was a couple of BDRs in training with me. And I was asking all kinds of questions. It's funny being an SC and kind of the way we think. My wife could tell you it would drive her nuts sometimes, because it's just how I am in life. Right? I'm always asking why. And I had asked the BDR, or the BDR manager, how does information get relayed to the salespeople and into to the SCs? And he proceeded to explain. All right, well, that's cool. Enter notes in Salesforce. Nothing magical about that. That works. And then I say, well, how about like if we can kick it up a notch? What if we introduce a tool, i.e., like Gong, where all this information can be, as opposed to making your reps suffer with all this notes they're going to take and then having to transfer it on, and all that time you're losing and all that information you're actually missing out on. What if we had a tool like Gong that actually can not just record the information, transcribe the information, but there's a whole slew of things you can do with it. And in the insights it gives you, phrases that are being used, and mapping that to closing ratio. But the minute I said recording the call, some of these BDRs, their eyes like lit up. They're like, that crazy wants to record this call. And so sometimes that will be viewed as I'm really overstepping my boundary, right? Because I'm now getting into a team that has nothing to do with,
Yeah.
with being an SE. But if we look at it from a business partner standpoint, because I look at it as an SE as being the sales team is your internal customer from that point of view. But from an entrepreneurial standpoint, we're business partners. So if I was like the CEO of my own company and I'm the CTO and you're whatever you are,
Yeah.
we're going to affect each other's pocket, right? So the quality of the discovery sessions and the demos and then the closing ratio I'm going to have is directly tied to your performance as an AE. And if you're doing your job correctly, are you doing that, initially the correct way? Is that information being captured? Am I getting that information? Are you getting too crazy and technical on these calls when you really should be? All that's going to affect me from my pocketbook and my family. So it's interesting. I agree with Ramsey 100% from an SC standpoint. And that's, I think, where I'm still kind of, because of that entrepreneurial side, we're business partners, right? So I want to make sure you're doing your job correctly and I'm doing my job correctly. And you should be doing the same thing. And I think that's that old saying, right? Iron sharpens iron. So holding each other accountable.
So the line for the SE is very dependent on how good the salesperson is and how much you want to make your commission. That's my opinion. Like if the salesperson sucks, I'm if I'm more than willing to overstep and do all of his job so I can make my commission. Right. If he's good, I can focus on what I'm doing. Right? That's not all SEs agree. Some SEs, like I've talked to SEs, and they, no, that's the salesperson's job. He's doing a bad job. Okay, but you're not getting your commission because he's not doing a bad job. You can either do something about it or stop complaining. That's how I think. Benny, you had an answer for my previous question though. I want to know.
did, yeah. So it's fine. I'm going to be the diplomat to a degree. Like I do see where you're coming from, for sure, without a doubt, that it is a salesperson's responsibility to bring the deal over the line, and it is their responsibility, I suppose, to be the quarterback in most respects. But that being said, I think that in an actual situation, this is also from my limited experience, obviously just being an SC at a couple different places and speaking to those on the show here. But I feel like an SC is somebody that when they're kind of given information, the people that they're connected to internally, even externally as well, there's just more people that they have access to, and there's more people that trust their word, I suppose, for what it is, as opposed to the salesperson saying something, whether it be internally or externally. And I feel like because a sales engineer's word, I suppose, is valued maybe more broadly across the organization for that reason, and because they're able to connect so many different groups together, rather than the salesperson who might have maybe one technical contact, maybe a couple. If they are more experienced and they are more tenured, without a doubt, these people are already going to have those connections on the technical side, which is great. And we'll have that perspective and everything. But I think that in many cases, SEs, and kind of speaking to what Jose had mentioned, SEs and sales reps kind of share that shared responsibility of maybe that like co-quarterback, I suppose, to a degree, in a true business partnership. So I mean, I think you're right. Like traditionally, the role is for the salesperson to be the quarterback to bring the deal over the line and to hold the responsibility of winning that deal. But in actual practice, I think that a sales engineer, solutions architect, just by virtue of them being connected to more parts of the organization, play that role, I suppose, more practically. Or maybe they're more of a strategist. I don't know, but maybe a shared responsibility is the way to go about it.
I would agree with that. I think the naming of quarterback versus running back kind of loses its point when you're talking to people who actually don't watch football too. So I don't know if everybody in the audience understands what we're talking about, but I agree with you to the extent that we have a responsibility as SEs. As SEs doesn't mean we don't we lack responsibility. It's just different kind of responsibility, I guess.
Yeah, culture is a big part of it too. The culture within the organization. There's times where I'm in some of these QBRs, and for those that don't know, QBR stands for quarterly business review, and usually it's right after your fiscal quarter, hopefully within not too long after it just ends, and you're meeting with it's typically for sales, but depending on the organization, SCs or SAs, in my organization we're called solution architects, we're invited to be part of that call. In the past, I would have to even address certain things and kind of speak to certain things, but where I'm at now, it's mainly the sales folks that are speaking to deals they won, deals they lost, a little bit of a post-mortem, and then what worked for them. And depending on the culture, it really comes down to culture in the organization. I think that's another kind of like a little side passion slash interest that I have, just to add to everything else, is really organizational culture, because that's huge. That's huge as how successful we are as SCs if we're empowered. The friction or lack thereof between sales and SCs comes down to culture. Whether a company is going to buy your product, adoption strategies, how they actually utilize the product, is going to come down to culture.
Yep.
There's organizations where the SCs are treated kind of like they work for the salesperson, and the salespeople are trained manage your resource. That's how they're trained, so they're going to try to manage the resource. And there's other organizations where the folks in the SC world are looked at, highly respected, and you do not waste his or her time unless you've done X, Y, and Z. And it's nice working for those because there's that respect factor there. So it really comes down to that, I think. And yeah, like Ramsey said, if they're dropping the ball, you want to go ahead and kind of come in and save the day. There were some situations I was in a couple of times where I decided, I need to be ready for it. And what I mean is, there's a couple of times where I was paired directly with my regional sales guy, or maybe a partner vendor was going to come over, or fly over to my area and do some kind of a training or presentation to a customer where they couldn't make it. Medical emergencies, fires, evacuation, other things that miss a flight. And especially in those scenarios where they were going to train or present to a sales audience, right? Like in a partner sales situation, or even a customer, and I'm going to be there from the technical standpoint. Um, and a couple of times when that happened, the choice was either, well, Jose, let me just send you my presentation and you run with it, or we need to cancel, reschedule. And I'm thinking, people have gone out of the way, they've bought tickets, that they're flying out there. Why reschedule, right? That time's precious with the customer, so run with it. So then that's where I realized, and this little comment here may draw a lot of like blowback, but it's fine. I seem to do that by accident sometimes. But I've always believed, a really great SE, you have to be 100% technical, and business or sales. And that really rubs some guys the wrong way, or guys and girls who are very technical, because like Ramsey was saying, that's the salesperson's job. It is. However, you're in a sales role. If you don't want to be in a sales role, then you can be in the customer success umbrella, you can be in implementation, PS. But if you're in a sales role, you're supporting a sales team, helping to drive deals and sell software, you're in a sales role. You don't have the luxury of hiding in the bat cave and just geeking out on technology and not giving a rip about the world. You have to be very aware of this, right? You have to be aware of how fast you respond to a customer. You have to be aware of if your salesperson sending out information that's inaccurate. If the collateral that he or she is tweaking has a typo in it, that's going to make that, not just them look bad, it's going to make your overall company look, very unprofessional. So again, looking at it from a entrepreneurial standpoint, we're gonna affect each other, right? So because of those scenarios that I've run into, I made a point to, I need to be able to wear that EE hat. And again, I know that's not the job, especially I think like positions posted out there, it will say sales engineer slash sales manager. It makes no sense to me. I know why they're doing it, because they want to save some money and just hire one guy to do both. But I think, at least for me, if I'm ready for those things when they come up, when I can't put the AE hat on, it kind of mentally shifts you to a whole different level. I'm looking at, did you follow up with the customer? Did you send them the information you promised? How long has it been? It's almost like you take on that sales manager role. And I'm sure some reps don't appreciate that, because they're like, dude, my manager already rides me. I don't need my SC doing that, right? But that I know is very, can be a big point of debate there. But again, it goes down to culture. Some AEs don't need that, and some have a contingency plan in place in case those things come up. There were situations where I was both a hybrid SC and post or implementation person, so pre and post, and we were definitely part of the sales arm, but it was part of our KPI metrics where we had to implement XYZ product, a couple times a month or in a quarter, because that was their way of keeping your skills fresh. if you're going to fill up your calendar with implementation and then even project management, I cannot be available for calls and that kind of thing, right? The more I'm doing that, the less I'm doing pre-sales. So it just depends on the culture if that's what they expect of you. Um, but yeah, what do you guys think about that? That's pretty. I don't know. I don't know if I just lost people with that or what the deal is there.
All right, I'll go first. I think the salesperson can put on his AE hat or her AE hat as long, like, if they want the deal and they need to put on their AE hat, it's up to them. If they don't put on their AE hat and lose the deal, they should be okay with it, not complain. But if they do put on their AE hat and have a chance to win it, they can win it. So I'm a hybrid SE, anyways, right now. So that's what I do. I do AE and SE stuff. So I'm already okay with it. But if you were, and I worked with a salesperson who was new to the industry, and I had to put on the AE hat quite a bit. But even still, even if you put on your AE hat, you're not doing everything that an AE does. You're not closing the deal. You're not doing the negotiation. You're closing the technical portion. You're following up. You're doing the presentation, even if it's the business side, but you're not asking for the PO in the end. Or if you are, well, that's up to you. Again, up to you and where you want to get to. There's a lot more things that AEs do. So you're doing a small portion of what AEs do, and you're doing the easiest portion. Presentations are easy for SEs, at least they should be. They already know the product, they know the business problem they're solving. So from that perspective, it shouldn't be too hard. That's my opinion about it. Benny?
Yeah, fair. I mean, makes sense, right? I think what Jose mentioned about it all coming down to culture, though, and I guess it kind of marries the two ideas to a degree, is that, well, I have to agree with the idea that it does come down to culture, where some organizations will either value SEs to very highly, where they can potentially play that pseudo AE role, and may be expected rather to pick up where the AE may drop the ball potentially. Other organizations, as mentioned earlier, would be the complete opposite. And I suppose if you find yourself in a role or in an organization that maybe you're not aligning with respect to their expectations of you in that role, you probably have two options. One of which would be to see if you could, and this would probably only work if you're in a role where you'd want to have more responsibility than you actually have. You could try to change the culture there, or try to change what that role actually means at that organization, and see if that goes well. And ideally it does. But if not, then essentially just find your fit somewhere else, I guess. It seems to be, at least from what I'm hearing, that there is opportunities for SEs to be either purely technical to a degree, but maybe not be the most effective they can be, but also the opportunity, I think, for most excelling SEs to be very technical, but also be very business oriented as well and proactive at it. And so I guess depending on who you are and what you're looking for, there is the opportunity for both out there, and just try to find it, I suppose.
Just speaking about culture, I want to point out that you don't have to change the culture of the entire company. You just have to change the culture between you and your salesperson initially. Right? Focus on that small culture. If the AE is okay with you doing more AE type work, I wouldn't worry about the culture of the company, unless like you're gonna get fired for it. You won't get fired for it if you're closing deals. Right? Like, they're gonna be happy about it. If you're doing more post sales work than pre sales, then you need to shift the way you think. But if you're doing more sales work, if you're a salesy SE, if you can think about sales, just think about that small micro environment that you can change the culture in versus the entire company. All right. We do need to jump to the not so fire round, but we do need to do it in the fire round succession. If that's okay. Jose, I did change the last question, but I'm gonna let Benny started us off with the first one.
Alrighty. Yes, sir. So what do you love about pre-sale, solutions engineering, sales engineering, all that? What do you love about it?
For me, I think it comes down to I love technology, number one, but I love I really love and enjoy the way technology adds value and really helps. So when we say we solve problems, right? I know it's become cliche, but for me it matters. And I get the I mean, obviously in the enterprise scenario, if we get a huge deal, we get that comp, right? That's awesome, right? But if I'm working like with a family member who's older and they're like, hey, what's all this, Zoom stuff and tablets and what's all this? I get just as much satisfaction just sitting down with them and just explaining what it's all about. So the technology itself, the value that it brings, and in the education component, that piece is huge. The comp obviously is awesome. Um, I think though, because I've asked this question to myself a couple of times throughout the last few years. I think the competitive piece of it, even to our earlier question we were just talking about, I've had SC roles where I had a quota. I had situations where the bulk of the company's products, it was more AE SE scenario, but there was a specific set of products just for the SEs that we actually had to be the rep and hunt and sell. And those are very different. And that's specifically this one role where we sold IT services. So whether a small or mid-sized business, they don't have servers and they don't have routers and firewalls, or we can sell them that, or block of time and going and building out a Dell server and all that. Um, so there's that competitive and that drive, I think, right? So again, with technology and business coming to play, and that, like, I've asked salespeople, why do you like being in sales? And usually the answer comes down to, I like to write my own ticket. That's what I've been told. So from an SC, it's a little bit of that, but you get to really geek out and have fun with technology. For me overall, though, I love to help people. So I think that sums it up.
All right. That's good. Second question of the day. What would you change about the role?
I think I think what's starting to happen now with groups that have been starting like SE Nation and Pre-Sales Collective, the awareness of the role. There's still a lot of very old-minded legacy bias in terms of what the SE does. From using terms like John Kerr would talk about the technical win, to being viewed as a strategic business partner. I think that's the perception and the awareness of the role. I wrote an article a couple of years back on LinkedIn. I think it's been a couple of years now, and it had to do with understanding the mind of an SC basically, and how we can be a catalyst for change. And that's only going to come through the awareness of what the role can bring, and it has to come from the top down. It's bottom up fights are long and not the greatest, but when there's that respect and that appreciation, that awareness, and it flows from the top down, then at that point you don't have to worry about sales guys bringing you into deals that aren't qualified. You don't have to worry about, I didn't really need to be part of that conversation. That respect is there. They're going to be more conscientious of utilizing your time. So I think that's been the biggest thing right now.
All right. Nice.
All right. I think we mentioned a couple already on the show today, particularly I think Pre-Sales Collective, maybe SCNY you mentioned as well. I think you mentioned that as well. But what are some other books, tools, or resources that you'd recommend for budding SCs or for those that want to build in?
That's a good question. There's a lot of books out there. I know you guys have a book list I subscribe to. And kind of like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think when you want to learn something, you're going to go all out to learn it. You don't have to wait for your company to give you this stuff, right? And I think for me, a lot of it came because in the past, most of everything I did technology-wise was self-taught. So I had to go hunt for the information. When I was learning Unix for the first time years back, or I was looking at, certain tech, I just had to Google it, learn it, YouTube it, read articles, white papers, right? So as an SC, I think if you care about your craft and if you care about being better, you're going to go through even unconventional sources to find information. It's almost like you're looking for gold, right? You're gonna hunt for it. You're gonna look in the rocks. You're gonna look everywhere. So that's why I mentioned Gartner webinars, Deloitte. There's other discussions and blogs that are out there that are not necessarily part of the SC toolkit, but they can be, right? And I think that's valuable because these are what your customers are reading, what they're consuming. There was a webinar I was on, I think last year, that Box actually did, and they brought in, I think he was like CTO of GE, and I got on that call just because I get to hear from a CTO of GE. That stuff's gold. What challenges is he having, right? I mean, of course, it was with the the bent of Box and how they helped. And I like Box, but still, it was like, well, this is huge, right? So going after the information, if you're really passionate about it, you're going to go after it. You don't have to have anyone, kind of nudge you that direction.
That's amazing. I love that. Looking for unconventional sources and just being able to tap into the brains of those that have really cool perspectives to share, even though it may not be directly related to what you're doing or your company is such a good idea. I love that. Thank you.
All right, last question of the not so fire round. I've changed it from previously. Previously, it was what would separate the good from the bad, but whatever. I wanted to change it. I want to see, is there a habit you're working on today? You're working on building so you can improve as a sales engineer?
Yeah. In the past, I've gone through different phases of learning. So like I remember even Ramsey reached out to you last year about some of these things. If I wanted to elevate my game, if you look at the skill set of an SE, you hear terms like having that boardroom presence and reading the room and emotional IQ or EQ, and then about discovering how discovery should be done and different types of techniques in sales demos and all these different things, right? I think in the past, I looked at it as if I want to really get better in this area, I'll go after learning that area. But I think now I look at it, it should really be part of our daily, kind of our daily experience. If there's a set of tasks that you attribute to being an SC that's part of that role, whether I'm supporting my team in one way or another, or it's deal related, but growth is growth. So if I get better at discovery because I read something in a book, even within those business hours, or even in personal time, or I'm watching a certain webinar, that value I gain, it's going to translate completely into that experience with my own team and customers. So the habit that I'm working on now is don't wait till you have to have the skill set. Just make it part of your daily. That's been a big one for me. I think the term was keep your engine warm. It's going to be hot when you're ramping up, but keep it warm. Don't let it get stale. There's enough busyness in life now with COVID that's going to distract you. Like I know you had a while back, you had Owen on from SNY, and I was just talking to him a few weeks ago because he went from 5 years at Salesforce and then to Amazon and out to Twilio. I'm like, dude, that's crazy, right? And we're talking about it. And one of the things I asked him was kind of like, how did he stay on top of all this stuff? He said, a radical prioritization. So if you take it and you apply it daily, just learn a little bit every day. I think that's going to be huge.
Speaking of keeping your engine warm, so I'm from Lebanon, and we have lots of like mountains. So when you're driving from one place to another, you're going up a mountain, and usually it's steep. And not all cars are American muscle cars. We had like Renault Megane that's like a 1.8 liter i4 4-cylinder cars that sometimes you'd be going like 10 miles an hour up the hill, and then it catches speed. Now you're going 50, going 60, which is good. Now you can get to where you want, and then a car gets in front of you and you take your foot off the gas and you're back to 10. So it's like keep your engine warm, like just keep your foot on the gas so you can keep going, because the more you keep your foot on the gas, the easier it gets, the faster you get to where you want to get. And as soon as you take it off, restarting is so much hard. An object in motion stays in motion. As long as you stop it, it's gonna be hard it's gonna take a lot more energy to get going. But yeah, awesome. Jose, if people can reach out to you, where can they do that?
Oh, sure. I have mainly it's LinkedIn. I follow people on Twitter. I'm not really big on it. As far as LinkedIn, I have a bit.ly URL shortener. So it's either bit.ly, it's pre-sales hero or solution sales. So bit.ly pre-sales hero or bit.ly solution sales, either one. Okay. They were available, so I took them. Makes it easy. So.
And also we'll link it on the show notes as well. This will be show 154, I believe. So it'll be out in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Jose. I appreciate it. And that brings us to the end of this show. Thanks, Jose, for coming on. It was great. It was great talking to you, as usual, because we've had these chats, Jose and I, a few times. And I love this circular learning approach. Don't just read a book. Read an article, from different sources. I just love that.
100%. Just being, I guess, just having a holistic view of everything is so, and having that circular learning methodology or mindset is so good. And I guess it kind of aligns itself well with what HR eventually started to do with performance evaluations, right? Because before, back in the day, it used to be maybe your managers, your as a person that's evaluating you, and that would be your performance evaluation. But nowadays, well, probably for a little while now, and moving forward, there's that whole concept of 360 evaluations, where you're you being evaluated, where you're not only being evaluated by your manager, but also by your colleagues and your customers and everybody around you, so that they're able to get a holistic view as to who you are. So it's kind of cool that he's taking the same learning approach in general, about just having a holistic view of everything around him in order for him to be most effective at his job.
That's never happened to me, actually. It sounds cool, but I've only had my managers do my reviews. I know my manager talked to other people within my team to get feedback, mainly because he doesn't live with me. You know, he was in Raleigh while I was working up here, so he asked other people. But my current manager, he's in Ottawa. We talk a lot, so nope, he's the only one. So that sounds like an interesting concept, the 360 review. I haven't seen it. Anyways, thank you all for listening. Thanks for being part of SE Nation. Although it seems that, well, not that it seems, SENY is also using SE Nation, and we had chatted about it. I feel like it's a great idea that we have a common, we're all part of SE Nation, so us and SENY. So if you haven't seen them, like, this is a random shout out to SENY and their affiliates and any other kind of organization that's trying to raise the SE profession higher than it currently is. So
we are SE Nation.
We are one SE Nation. I don't know what that means. That in Lebanon means something completely different.
Fair enough. I was talking about like a Rock Nation thing, but never mind.
That's a political affiliation in Lebanon, which I will not get into. Anyways, if you're watching the YouTube video, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not, just ignore completely the last 30 seconds of your life, and we'll all be good. Anyways, if you haven't left a rating and review after listening to the last 30 seconds, please make sure to give us a 1-star review. If you've listened before, I'm okay with a 5-star review. And with that, this is Ramsey signing off for Benny as well.